My roommate was wearing my dead brother's shirt when my fiancée opened our apartment door. She had one bare shoulder showing, my coffee mug in her hand, and the smile of a woman who had rehearsed surprise in the mirror when I asked why she was wearing it. She laughed softly and said, "It was an accident." Then she looked past me at Daniel and added, "Maybe I wanted you to notice. My name is Claire Dawson. I was 29 years old then, working as a patient billing coordinator at a physical therapy clinic in Portland, Oregon, which meant I spent my days reading fine print, correcting other people's careless mistakes, and staying calm while strangers yelled at me over things I did not cause. That skill turned out to be useful at home, because by the time my roommate, this Samondro, wore that shirt, she had already been crossing lines for months. The shirt was faded blue cotton, soft from years of washing, with a small tear near the left cuff. It had belonged to my older brother, Evan, who died when I was 22, and he was 26. He used to wear it on Sunday mornings when he made pancakes too early and played old Springsteen songs too loud. After he died, my mother put it in a box with his watch, his baseball cap, and 3 letters he had written me from college. I did not wear it often. I kept it folded on the top shelf of my closet, behind a stack of winter sweaters, not because it was expensive, but because it was one of the last things in my life that still felt untouched. Some people have jewelry. Some people have photographs. I had a blue shirt that smelled faintly of cedar even after all those years, because I kept it in a drawer liner. Evan once teased me for buying. Tessa knew that. She knew because the first week she moved in, she saw me holding it after a hard phone call with my mother. She had asked what it was, and I told her the truth. She had put a hand over her heart and said, "Oh my God, Claire, that's sacred." I remember feeling grateful that she understood. I did not understand then that some people call things sacred only after they have measured how much power those things hold. Tessa moved into my apartment after her lease fell through, which was the phrase she used. Later, I learned that meant she had fought with her previous roommate over unpaid utilities, a borrowed dress that came back stained, and a party that got the landlord involved. But when she called me crying from a rideshare outside a storage unit, she sounded small and abandoned. She said she had nowhere to go. I had a spare room and an old habit of mistaking emergency for intimacy. We had met 2 years earlier through a mutual friend at a volunteer event downtown. Tessa was the kind of woman people noticed quickly. She had bright eyes, smooth hair, and a way of making every conversation feel like a secret being shared too soon. She laughed loudly, touched arms when she spoke, and told stories that made her sound unlucky rather than responsible. Back then, I thought she was brave for being open. Now I know openness can also be a costume. At first, living with her felt almost fun. She brought fresh flowers from the grocery store and arranged them in chipped mason jars. She made playlists for cleaning days. She called our apartment the girls' sanctuary, even though the lease, the deposit, the internet bill, and every repair request were in my name. I did not mind in the beginning. I had spent years being careful, and Tessa made carelessness look like freedom. Then small things started changing places. My almond milk vanished faster than I drank it. My black cardigan appeared on the back of her chair. My shampoo bottle got lighter. When I mentioned it, Tessa always gave the same smile. Half apology and half dare. "We live together," she would say. "It's not like we're strangers." She made boundaries sound rude. She made basic respect sound like emotional distance. She made me feel petty for noticing my own life being borrowed. Daniel noticed before I admitted it. He was 31, a project manager for a construction company. Steady, in a way that used to calm me. He had kind hands, a quiet laugh, and the patience to sit through my explanations when my anxiety turned one problem into 10. We had been engaged for 4 months. Together for 3 years. He knew about Evan. He knew about the shirt. He had held me the first time I wore it after a nightmare. When Tessa first met him, she hugged him too long. Not scandalously long. Just long enough for me to notice, and then feel foolish for noticing. She said, "So you're the famous Daniel." As if I had been hiding a celebrity. He smiled politely and stepped back. That should have been enough. But Tessa had a talent for finding the tiny gap between discomfort and accusation, then living there, rent-free. She started joining us in the kitchen when Daniel came over. Even if she had been in her room all evening, she would appear in leggings and an oversized sweatshirt, hair twisted up messily, but perfectly, asking if anyone wanted wine. She laughed at his jokes before he finished them. She asked him for help opening jars, fixing shelves, carrying boxes, checking her tire pressure. Each request was small enough to seem harmless. Together, they formed a map. I told myself I was being insecure. That is what women are trained to do when someone tests our boundaries with a smile. We audit our tone. We cross-examine our instincts. We worry about seeming jealous, controlling, dramatic. Tessa helped with that. If I paused after one of her little performances, she would tilt her head and say, "Are you okay? You seem tense." Not guilty, concerned. That was her gift. She could cut you and then ask why you were bleeding. The first real argument happened over a green dress. I had bought it for Daniel's company dinner. A simple satin dress I saved for 3 paychecks to afford. The afternoon of the dinner, I found Tessa in the bathroom, wearing it, taking mirror photos with one hand on her waist. She gasped when she saw me, then laughed like we were in a sitcom. "Oh my God. Don't be mad," she said. "I just wanted to see if the color worked on me." I stood there with my towel in my hands, feeling heat rise up my neck. I told her to take it off. She rolled her eyes, but she did. Laughter. When Daniel arrived, she told the story before I could. "Claire almost murdered me over a dress," she said, making her voice light and wounded. Daniel looked at me, confused, waiting for me to laugh. I did laugh. That was the part I hated most. I laughed to keep the room from turning against me. That night, on the way home from the dinner, Daniel said, "This says a lot, but I don't think she means anything by it." I looked out the passenger window at the wet streets shining under the traffic lights and said nothing. I knew he was trying to be reasonable. I also knew reason can become cowardice when it asks the hurt person to keep absorbing the impact. But I was tired. I had learned young that explaining pain too many times makes it look negotiable. My family taught me that, though they would deny it, after Evan died, grief reorganized our house around my mother's sorrow and my father's silence. I became the reliable daughter, the one who handled insurance forms, answered sympathy cards, drove my mother to appointments, and made sure my father ate dinner. Nobody asked if I was falling apart. They praised me for being strong, and I mistook that praise for love. Strength became the rent I paid to belong. That was why Tessa confused me at first. She did not demand strength. She demanded access. She wanted my clothes, my food, my stories, my friends, my fiancé's attention. And eventually, the parts of me I kept locked away. If I resisted, she called it rejection. If I objected, she called it jealousy. If I went quiet, she filled the silence with her version of events before anyone could ask for mine. The shirt disappeared on a Thursday. I remember because I was doing laundry after work, still wearing my clinic badge. When I opened my closet and noticed the stack of sweaters had shifted, the blue shirt was gone. For a second, my brain refused to make sense of the empty space. I checked the drawer, the hamper, and the coat rack, the storage bin under my bed. Then I checked again, slower, as if grief had hidden it from me as a test. Tessa was not home. Daniel was coming over later to finalize wedding guest lists. A task I had been avoiding because every family name felt like a small negotiation with the past. I texted Tessa and asked if she had seen the shirt from my closet. 3 dots appeared, vanished, appeared again. Finally, she replied. Which shirt? I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. She knew which shirt. Some lies announced themselves by pretending to need details. She came home 40 minutes later, carrying takeout and wearing a long coat buttoned to her throat. Her cheeks were flushed from the cold. Her perfume too sweet in the narrow hallway. I asked again. She blinked, set the takeout on the counter, and said, Claire, I don't go digging through your closet. She sounded offended enough to make me feel cruel. That was another talent. She could make an accusation feel like something you had done to her. I almost backed down. My hand was on the edge of the counter, and I remember pressing my thumb into a nick in the laminate just to stay present. Then Daniel knocked. Tessa looked at the door, then at me. Something moved across her face so quickly I might have missed it if I had not spent months learning her expressions. It was not fear. It was anticipation. She said, Can you get that I need to change? But she did not go to her room. She walked into the hallway bathroom instead, the one guests used, and closed the door halfway. I opened the apartment door for Daniel, and before I could say anything, Tessa stepped out behind me wearing my brother's blue shirt like it was a casual mistake, like she had found it in a pile of laundry, like she had not entered my room, climbed onto a chair, and taken it from the highest shelf. Daniel's face changed before mine did. His eyes went to the cuff, the tear, the buttons I had replaced with mismatched ones years ago because I could not bring myself to throw the shirt away. He knew. That was what made it worse. Tessa knew. He knew. 2. She lifted one hand to her collar and smiled with a softness that made my stomach turn. Oh, she said. Is this yours? I asked her to take it off. My voice was so quiet I barely recognized it. Tessa glanced at Daniel and gave a little laugh. The kind women use when they want a man to rescue them from another woman's seriousness. I grabbed it by accident. She said, Your laundry was on the couch. There had been no laundry on the couch. The shirt had not been washed in months. It had been folded with cedar and grief. This, Daniel said, and his voice had a warning in it. She ignored him. She looked directly at me then, and the mask slipped just enough for me to see the pleasure underneath. "Maybe I wanted you to notice," she said. The apartment went very still. It was not just the shirt anymore. It was every borrowed sweater, every interrupted date, every joke at my expense. Every time she had made me defend my right to keep something mine. I walked toward her and held out my hand. "Take it off," I said again. She leaned back against the bathroom doorframe, still smiling. But now, there was calculation behind it. "You're being intense," she said. "It's just a shirt." That sentence hit harder than if she had shouted. Because people who steal what matters to you always try to rename it before anyone else can understand the theft. Daniel stepped between us, not touching either of us. "This, change," he said. For 1 second, I thought that would be the end of it. Then she looked at him with wet eyes that appeared so fast, they startled me. I didn't know I wasn't allowed to exist in this apartment. She whispered, "I'm sorry my presence bothers you both so much." She made my brother's shirt into proof of her victimhood. She made my pain into bad hospitality. That was when I saw the phone in her hand. The camera was angled low, half hidden against her thigh, but the red dot was visible on the screen. She was recording. Not openly, not honestly, but enough to capture my raised voice if I gave her one. Enough to cut out the beginning. Enough to show the world a trembling woman in a dead man's shirt and a furious roommate demanding she undress. I worked in billing. I knew what missing context could do. So I stopped. I lowered my hand. I looked at the shirt. Then, at the woman wearing it. And something inside me went cold in a way that felt almost clean. Tessa's eyes flickered. She had expected tears. Yelling. Maybe a shove she could turn into a story. Instead, I smiled. Not because anything was funny. Because I finally understood the game. And the person who understands the game first does not have to keep playing it. I said, "Keep recording." Her mouth tightened. Daniel turned to me. Confused. I reached past him, picked up my own phone from the counter, and opened the apartment group chat, where months of Tessa's messages lived like a diary she had forgotten she was writing. Rent excuse. Borrowed items. Apologies with timestamps. Jokes about taking my clothes because I had better taste. A photo she had once sent wearing my cardigan with the caption, "Don't tell Claire." Tessa's smile weakened. She did not know yet what I had saved, or why I had saved it. She did not know. I kept records for a living, and had a private folder labeled "Apartment" with screenshots, receipts, utility payments, and every conversation where she admitted owing me money. She did not know that 2 weeks earlier, after the green dress incident, I had written down every boundary she crossed because I had finally stopped trusting my memory to survive her version of events. But the shirt was different. The shirt was not rent. It was not shampoo. It was not a dress. It was the thing she had chosen because she knew it would hurt cleanly and deeply. And because she believed I would rather swallow that pain than risk looking unstable. She was almost right. That was the part that still makes me angry. Not that she underestimated me. That she had studied me carefully enough to know exactly where to press. I looked at Daniel. And for the first time that night, I saw something I did not want to see. He was angry. Yes. Protective. Yes. But he was also embarrassed. Not by Tessa, by the scene, by the mess, by the fact that my pain had become inconvenient in a room where he wanted peace. That small realization landed quietly. But it landed, because sometimes betrayal does not enter through the front door. Sometimes it stands beside you and asks you to lower your voice. Tessa crossed her arms over my brother's shirt and said, "Are we seriously doing this right now?" I looked at her phone again. Then I looked at the hallway mirror behind her, where all three of us were reflected in one narrow frame. Her wearing my grief, Daniel standing in the middle, me with my clinic badge still clipped to my sweater. Exhausted and suddenly awake, I knew then that the story would not end in that hallway. I did not scream. I did not grab the shirt. I did not beg Daniel to understand. I simply said, "Take it off. Wash it by hand. Leave it on my bed. And start looking for another place." Tessa stared at me like I had slapped her. Daniel whispered my name, but I had already opened my folder, already started scrolling, already realized that the woman wearing my brother's shirt had left a trail long before she left fingerprints. Tessa did not move out that night. She went into the bathroom, closed the door, and stayed in there for 23 minutes. I know because I stood in the kitchen watching the oven clock while Daniel leaned against the counter with both hands, saying nothing. When she finally came out, she was wearing her own sweatshirt, and my brother's shirt was balled damply against her chest like a towel from a gym bag. She handed it to me with 2 fingers. "It's wet because I rinsed it," she said, since apparently I contaminated it. Her voice had that careful tremble again, the one designed for witnesses. Daniel looked at the floor. I took the shirt from her and felt the cold water soak into my palms. It smelled like her perfume and lavender hand soap. I wanted to ask what kind of person touched another woman's grief and then acted wounded when asked to let go. Instead, I laid it flat on a clean towel. Tessa disappeared into her room and shut the door hard enough to rattle the hallway frame. The apartment felt smaller afterward. Daniel came up behind me and put a hand on my shoulder, but I stepped away before I could stop myself. He looked hurt. That almost made me apologize. Habit is a dangerous thing. I had apologized for discomfort so many times that my mouth still prepared the words even when I had done nothing wrong. "She crossed a line," he said finally. "I know that." I kept smoothing the sleeves of the shirt, trying not to look at the stretched collar. "Then, why do you sound like you're asking me not to react?" He exhaled through his nose. "Tired already." "I'm not. I just don't want this to explode." I turned toward him then. "It already exploded. You just don't like the noise it made." He flinched, and for 1 second I saw the man I loved, trying to decide whether to meet me in the truth or pull me back into politeness. He chose the middle, which is where weak people go when they want credit for understanding pain without having to confront the person causing it. "We can handle this calmly," he said. I almost laughed. Calmly had become the word people used when they wanted me to bleed more quietly. The next morning, I woke up to 14 notifications and a message from a coworker that said, "Claire, what is going on?" Tessa had posted a video at 1:12 a.m. It was only 18 seconds long. It started after the part where I asked for the shirt back and ended before the part where I noticed she was recording. In the clip, I looked pale and rigid, saying, "Take it off." Tessa's caption read, "When your roommate thinks grief gives her permission to control what you wear." I sat on the edge of my bed with the phone in my hand and felt the room tilt slowly. Not fast enough to be panic, but not slow enough to be calm. She had not named Evan. Not directly. She did not say it was my dead brother's shirt. Conotorous. She did not say she had taken it from my closet. She did not say she had known exactly what it meant. She did not need to. Missing context did the dirty work for her. By 8 in the morning, mutual friends had commented with heart emojis and phrases like, "Protect your peace," and some people weaponized trauma. A woman I barely knew wrote, "This is why roommates can be so toxic." Tessa replied to that one with, "I've been trying so hard to be patient." Patient. That word sat in my throat like glass. She had invaded my room, worn my dead brother's shirt, recorded my reaction, and then presented patience as her suffering. Daniel called 3 times before I answered. His voice was tight, rushed, embarrassed. I saw it. He said. I asked her to take it down. I waited. There was always a second sentence with Daniel. The first sounded right. The second usually asked me to make it easier. But Claire, people are seeing this. And I think you should post something before it gets worse. Something calm. Maybe say there was a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding, I repeated. He went quiet. I looked at the blue shirt, drying across my desk chair. Its sleeves hanging limp in the morning light. She took Evan's shirt from my closet. Daniel Sahil. And the sound cracked something small inside me. I know she was wrong. But the internet doesn't know that if you go too hard, it could make you look vindictive. That was the first consequence. Not the video. Not the comments. The first consequence was realizing the man I had planned to marry was more afraid of my anger being visible than he was of my pain being real. He wanted the truth trimmed into something socially acceptable. He wanted a statement that protected everyone from discomfort. Everyone except me. I did not post. I went to work. I sat at my desk under fluorescent lights and corrected insurance claim errors while my phone buzzed in my drawer. There is a strange humiliation in having strangers discuss your nervous system while you are trying to eat yogurt in a break room. My supervisor, Marlene, came to my cubicle around noon and asked if I needed to take the afternoon. I told her no. Then my hand shook so badly, I entered the wrong date of birth twice. Marlene was 58. Blunt and kind in a way that never announced itself. She closed my cubicle door halfway and said, "Whatever happened? Don't respond while you're shaking." I looked at her, and something in my face must have told her enough. She pointed at my computer. "Make a folder. Save everything. Screenshots. Timestamps. Message. Don't argue with a performance. Preserve it." I almost cried then. Not because she was gentle, but because she was practical. That night, when I came home, Tessa was sitting on the couch with a glass of wine, watching television in my grey cardigan. She had taken down the video, but not before it had been saved and shared enough to make its point. She did not look ashamed. She looked rested. "Daniel Kamebi," she said, without turning toward me. "He thinks we should all talk." The word we landed, like she had already moved into the center of my relationship and set furniture down. I asked her to remove my cardigan. She looked at the sleeve like she had forgotten what she was wearing. "Seriously," she said, "after everything today, you're still doing this?" I stood by the door with my bag over my shoulder, suddenly too tired to set it down. "Yes." I said. She smiled into her wine. You know, maybe this is why Daniel seems so exhausted lately. It must be hard loving someone who keeps a museum of wounds. The sentence was quiet. That made it worse. Loud cruelty gives you something to push against. Quiet cruelty slides under the door and waits. I thought of Evan's shirt, the cedar drawer, my mother's trembling hands when she packed his things. I thought of Daniel telling me not to look vindictive. I thought of every time I had made myself smaller, so no one would have to admit they were standing too close. Daniel arrived 20 minutes later, with takeout we had not planned and a face full of forced neutrality. Tessa offered him a plate before I could speak. She moved around the kitchen easily, opening my cabinets, using my dishes, touching the back of his chair when she passed. It was almost impressive how quickly she turned a confrontation into a dinner scene. She had always understood staging. She knew people believe the person who looks most comfortable in the room. We sat at the table, the three of us, with cartons of noodles cooling between us. Daniel started by saying he wanted everyone to feel heard. Tessa lowered her eyes. I just feel like I've been walking on eggshells, she said. Claire never says what she needs until she explodes. I borrowed a shirt without realizing it was some kind of shrine. And suddenly, I'm being treated like a criminal. She paused at the word shrine, letting it poison the air. I looked at Daniel. He did not correct her. He knew it was not a shrine. He knew it was not random. He knew because I had told him the story of that shirt in bed at midnight with tears on my face. But he stared at his noodles, jaw tight, choosing silence again. That was the second consequence. Not that Tessa lied. Liars lie. The consequence was that Daniel's silence made her lie feel invited. I opened my phone and pulled up the photo Tessa had sent weeks earlier, wearing my cardigan with a caption about not telling me. Then another message where she wrote, I borrowed your black boots. Don't hate me. Then the rent reminders. Then the text from the afternoon before which shirt I slid the phone across the table to Daniel first. His face changed as he scrolled. Tessa stopped eating. Claire, she said slowly. Saving private messages like that is really unhealthy. I looked at her. Taking private things and filming reactions is unhealthy. Her eyes sharpened. For a second, the soft roommate disappeared, and I saw the woman beneath the performance, irritated, not because she was accused, but because the evidence had interrupted her control. You're making this into something ugly, she said. Over clothes. Over access. I said. My voice surprised me. It did not shake. Over my bedroom. My belongings. My grief. My relationship. My home. Daniel looked up at the word home. Maybe he realized then that I had paid for every square foot Tessa had been using as a stage. Maybe he realized he had been treating my apartment like neutral ground when it had never been neutral. It was mine, because I had built peace there after years of carrying everyone else's chaos. Tessa pushed her chair back. Fine, she said. If you want me gone, I'll go. But don't pretend this isn't about Daniel. The room went silent. She turned to him with tears already gathering. You feel it too, don't you? How intense she is, how she makes love feel like a responsibility. Daniel closed his eyes. I watched his face, waiting for outrage, waiting for the clean loyalty I had once believed would come naturally from love. Instead, he said, This, don't. Not. That's not true. Not, don't speak about Claire that way. Just don't. As if she had named something inconvenient rather than cruel. Tessa heard the weakness in it and leaned closer. I'm sorry, she whispered. I just think someone should say it. That was the third consequence. A woman wearing my cardigan had sat at my table and explained my own fiancé's exhaustion to me. And he did not leave. I stood up. Both of them looked at me, like the scene required my next line. I gave them one. Daniel. Let's go home. His eyes snapped to mine. Claire. I shook my head once. Go home. I'm not discussing our relationship with a roommate who steals from me and edits videos for sympathy. Tessa made a small, wounded sound. I ignored it. And Tessa, you have 30 days under Oregon. Notice rules because you're not on the lease. I'll put it in writing tonight. The legal part was not dramatic. It was not a threat. It was procedure. That made her angrier. People like Tessa prefer emotional rooms because facts have corners. She stood so fast, her wine nearly tipped over. You'd make me homeless over a shirt, she said. There it was again. The shrinking of the wound. A shirt. A dress. A cardigan. A misunderstanding. A roommate thing. Anything except what it was. No, I said. I'm ending a pattern. Daniel rubbed his forehead. Claire, maybe tonight isn't the time. I looked at him then. Really looked. And felt the last of my pleading drain out of me. That's the problem. I said, with you. It's never the time when someone else might be uncomfortable. He looked ashamed. I did not soften it for him. Shame is sometimes the only honest doorway left. He left 10 minutes later. Tessa cried after he was gone. But not the way people cry when they are sorry. She cried loudly in her bedroom, with the door cracked open. On the phone to someone she wanted me to know existed. I just don't feel safe here, she said between sobs. She keeps files on me. I stood in my bathroom brushing my teeth, listening to her turn accountability into danger. My reflection looked older than 29. The next morning, I printed the written notice at work, dated it, and made a copy. Marlene watched me slide it into a plain envelope and said, "You're doing the right thing." I wanted to believe her, but doing the right thing felt lonely and cold. It did not feel like victory. It felt like standing outside your own life with a clipboard, documenting the damage because no one had loved you clearly enough to stop it. When I got home, the apartment was too quiet. Tessa's bedroom door was closed, but music played softly behind it. I taped the envelope to her door, took a picture with the timestamp visible, and sent her the same notice by email. Then, I checked my closet. The cardigan was back. The boots were back. The green dress was back on the hanger. At first, I thought she had finally understood. Then I saw the blue shirt. It was in the washing machine, twisted around a towel, pale streaks running down the front, like diluted paint. The left sleeve had stretched at the cuff, and the small tear near the wrist had opened into a jagged split. I stood there with the lid raised, looking down at what was left of it, and the sound that came out of me did not feel human. Tessa appeared behind me almost immediately, as if she had been waiting. "Oh my God," she said, hand to her mouth. "Claire, I'm so sorry. I was trying to help. I thought washing it properly would make things better." Her voice was perfect. Her face was perfect. The damage was perfect too. Not total enough to look deliberate. but bad enough to hurt every time I saw it. I lifted the shirt from the machine with both hands. It was heavy and cold, and for one terrible second, it felt like holding Evan's absence all over again. That night, I did something I had not done in years. I called my mother and told her the truth before I could edit myself into calm. I told her about the shirt, the video, Daniel, the dinner table, the washing machine. She was silent for so long. I thought the call had dropped. Then she said, "Claire, your brother would have hated that you were alone in that room." I pressed my hand over my eyes and finally cried. My mother did not tell me to forgive. She did not tell me to keep peace. She said, "Bring it here this weekend. I'll see what can be repaired." That sentence became the first warm thing I had felt in days. Not because the shirt could be restored. Maybe it could not. But because someone had finally treated the damage like damage, not drama. Someone had named the wound, without asking me to make it easier to witness. On Saturday morning, Daniel came over while I was packing the shirt in tissue paper. He looked tired, unserven, carrying coffee like an apology. This was out, probably making sure someone else knew her side first. Daniel stood in my doorway and said, "I should have defended you better." I kept folding the tissue. "Yes," I said. He swallowed. I was trying not to make everything worse. I looked at him. "You did make it worse. You just did it quietly." He nodded as if he deserved that. Maybe he did. But apology is not the same as repair. And I had become old enough to know the difference. He reached for my hand, then stopped when I did not offer it. "What happens to us?" he asked. The question should have broken me. Instead, it clarified something. I had spent so long asking whether Daniel would choose me that I had forgotten I was also allowed to choose. "I don't know," I said, "but I know I won't marry someone who needs a public relations strategy before he can stand up for me." He looked down. I thought he might argue. He did not. That hurt too, in its own way. Sometimes you want the person who failed you to fight hard enough to prove the failure was temporary. Sometimes their quiet acceptance tells you the weakness was not a moment. It was part of the structure. Tessa gave notice of her own the following week, but only after sending me an email full of phrases like hostile living environment, emotional volatility, and unresolved trauma. She copied Daniel. She also requested that I return half her last month's rent because she no longer felt welcome. I read the email twice, then filed it in the apartment folder. No reply. Not yet. I had learned something by then. Silence was not weakness if you used it to prepare. She moved out 16 days later, dragging boxes down the hallway while FaceTiming someone and saying, "I'm just ready to be around emotionally safe people." She left behind a cracked plant pot, 2 unpaid utility shares, a wine stain under the couch cushion, and the smell of her perfume in the bathroom cabinet. Daniel did not come that day. I did not ask him to. I changed the lock code before sunset and stood in the apartment listening to the quiet settle. For a while, I thought that would be the end of it. Tessagone. Daniel uncertain. My brother's shirt damaged, but folded safely at my mother's house, where she repaired the sleeve by hand with thread that did not quite match. Life did not snap back into place. It never does. It moved carefully, like a person recovering from a fall, testing each step before trusting weight to it again. Then, 3 weeks after Tessa moved out, an invitation arrived in my email from Daniel's sister. It was for a small engagement celebration his parents had apparently decided to host anyway. To bring everyone back together after a stressful season. My name was still on it. Daniel's name was beside mine. At the bottom, in cheerful gold font, was one sentence that made my whole body go still. Tessa will be joining us too. Since she has been such a support to Daniel during this difficult time, I stared at that line until the gold font blurred. Tessa will be joining us too. Not Tessa was invited. Not Tessa might attend. Joining us. As if she had always belonged inside the family I had been preparing to marry into. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and the apartment silent around me. And for the first time in weeks, I did not feel sad. I felt studied, like someone had taken my wound, turned it over, and found a new place to press. Daniel called 20 minutes later. He let it ring. Then he texted, "Please don't be upset. My mom invited her," before I could stop it. That was such a familiar sentence that I almost smiled. Before I could stop it, as if people kept slipping into the center of our relationship while he stood nearby with both hands in his pockets. I typed, "Why is your mother inviting my former roommate to our engagement party?" Then I deleted our and changed it to your. His reply came slowly. "She thinks Tessa has been unfairly blamed. She said it would look cruel to exclude her after everything." There it was again. Look. Not be. Look. Reputation had always mattered to Daniel's family. But I had mistaken their politeness for kindness. His mother, Elaine, hosted charity luncheons, wrote thank you notes on thick cream paper, and treated emotional mess like spilled wine on a white rug. The stain mattered less than who saw it happen. I wrote back, "Did you tell her what Tessa did?" Daniel answered. I told her the situation was complicated. I closed my eyes. Complicated was another soft coffin people built around the truth when they did not want to carry it in daylight. Tessa had stolen from me, recorded me, damaged something irreplaceable, and inserted herself into my engagement. Daniel had called that complicated. I pushed my laptop shut and sat in the kitchen until the refrigerator hum sounded too loud. The next day, Elaine called me during my lunch break. Her voice was smooth, careful, already disappointed. "Claire, sweetheart, I wanted to check in before Saturday. I know there has been tension, but I do hope you'll come with an open heart." I stood outside the clinic behind the employee entrance, watching rain gather in a pothole. "Elaine," I said, "why is Tessa invited?" A pause, then a sigh gentle enough to sound rehearsed. "She has been very upset," Elaine said, "and Daniel is under a lot of pressure. I think everyone needs to show a little grace." Grace. I had learned to be suspicious of that word when it came from people who never paid the cost of offering it. "Did Tessa tell you she took my brother's shirt from my closet?" I asked. Another pause. She said there was confusion about laundry. I laughed once. Not because it was funny, but because my body had run out of softer responses. Elaine's tone cooled. "Claire, I understand grief can make ordinary conflicts feel larger." I looked down at my clinic shoes. The scuffed toes. The rain-dark pavement. Something inside me settled. My grief didn't open my closet. I said, "My grief didn't record me without context. My grief didn't post the video." Elaine did not answer right away. When she did, she sounded hurt, which was impressive, considering I had simply named facts. I hope you're not planning to bring hostility into our home." That sentence gave me the shape of the room before I ever entered it. I could already see it. Daniel tense by the fireplace. Elaine smiling too brightly. Tessa, small and brave in the corner. Everyone waiting for me to prove them right. If I refused to attend, I would be dramatic. If I attended and stayed quiet, Tessa would win the story by occupying it. If I attended and defended myself, they would call that hostility. The trap was not subtle. It was just polished. I went back to my desk and opened the apartment folder. It had become a strange archive of my own disbelief. Screenshots, rent transfers, photos of damaged clothing, emails, the time-stamped notice taped to Tessa's door, and the video she posted before deleting it. I had saved that too. Not because I wanted to relive it, but because Marlene had taught me that performances should be preserved before the performer changes costumes. Then I opened something I had almost forgotten. The voice memo. The night Tessa wore the shirt. When I reached for my phone to open the group chat, my thumb had hit record by accident. At least I thought it was an accident then. It captured 12 minutes of audio from the kitchen table, the hallway, the bathroom door. Not everything was clear, but enough was. Tessa saying, "Maybe I wanted you to notice." Tessa saying, "It's just a shirt." Tessa saying, "I didn't know I wasn't allowed to exist." I listened to it once with earbuds in, my hands flat on my desk. My own voice sounded quieter than I remembered. Daniel's sounded smaller. Tessa's sounded less fragile without her face attached to it. That was the thing about audio. It stripped away trembling lips and polished tears. It left timing. It left tone. It left the little pause before a lie. The tiny pleasure in a cruel sentence. The way a person shifts from mockery to victimhood when an audience enters. I did not send it to Elaine. Not then. Evidence used too early becomes gossip. Evidence used at the right time becomes a door no one can close. Instead, I made copies. One on my phone. One on my laptop. One in cloud storage under a file name, so boring, no one would open it by accident. Utility records, April. Then I printed the receipts showing Tessa's unpaid utilities and the email where she admitted borrowing my boots and cardigan. Facts with dates. Facts with edges. Daniel came to my apartment that evening. He texted first, asking if I would let him in. I almost said no, then decided I wanted to see who he had become when no one else was watching. He stood in the doorway wearing the jacket I had bought him last Christmas. Rain shining on his shoulders. "I messed up," he said. "Not polished, not rehearsed, just tired. My mom shouldn't have invited Tessa." "No," I said. She shouldn't have known Tessa well enough to invite her. He looked down. That landed. Tessa called her. He admitted. After the video, she said she didn't have anyone here. Mom felt bad. I leaned against the doorframe and felt the old ache rise. Not sharp now, but heavy. "And you let your mother comfort the woman who hurt me." Daniel's eyes filled. But tears did not move me the way they once did. Too many people had used moisture as evidence of goodness. I didn't think it would become this. He said, "I thought if everyone calmed down, it would pass." I nodded. "That's what you keep choosing. Passing over, repairing, calm over truth, appearance over loyalty." He swallowed. "Are you still coming Saturday?" I looked at him for a long moment. Yes. Relief crossed his face too quickly. I held up one hand. But I'm not coming to be managed. His relief vanished. What does that mean? It means if Tessa lies about me in front of your family, I will correct her. He rubbed his jaw. Can we please not make it a confrontation? There he was again, at the edge of courage, negotiating with it. I stepped back from the doorway. Danielle. It already is a confrontation. The only question is whether I'm allowed to speak during it. He had no answer. That was answer enough. On Friday, my mother called to say the shirt was ready. I drove across town after work. The rain, turning the windshield into silver lines. She lived in a small blue house in Beaverton, the kind with wind chimes and old photographs on the hallway wall. When she handed me the shirt, I saw her repair immediately. The sleeve was mended with dark blue thread. Careful, but visible. The tear had become a scar. Not hidden, held together. I couldn't make it look new. She said. I ran my thumb over the stitches and felt my throat tighten. I didn't need new. My mother sat across from me at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. You know, she said quietly, after Evan died, I let you become useful because I didn't know how to help you be hurt. The words stunned me more than any apology would have. They were not dramatic. They were worse. They were honest. I looked at her, and for a second, I was 22 again, carrying casseroles from neighbors into the fridge, while adults praised my composure. I thought if I was easy, no one would leave me. I said. My mother's face crumpled, but she did not interrupt. I folded the shirt slowly. Tessa figured that out. Daniel benefited from it. His family expects it. My mother nodded once. Then don't be easy on Saturday, she said. Be clear. Before I left, she gave me a small envelope. Inside was a photo I had not seen in years. Evan, wearing the blue shirt, standing on a hiking trail, squinting into sunlight with one hand lifted like he was blocking the camera and waving at the same time. On the back, in his messy handwriting, he had written, Claire said this shirt makes me look like a tired substitute teacher. She is wrong. I laughed through tears in my mother's kitchen. That photo changed something. Until then, the shirt had been a relic, a fragile thing I protected, because loss had frozen it in place. But seeing Evan alive inside it reminded me that grief was not just softness. It was memory with a spine. Tessa had not damaged Evan. She had damaged cloth. What she had tried to steal was my right to decide what mattered to me. That was different. That could be defended. Saturday evening, I wore black pants, a cream blouse, and the blue shirt folded inside my bag with the photo tucked into its pocket. Not as a weapon, as proof to myself. Daniel's parents lived in a craftsman house, in a quiet neighborhood, where every porch light looked intentional. Through the front window, I could see warm lamps, wine glasses, moving silhouettes. I sat in my car for a full minute, with both hands on the steering wheel, breathing, like I tell patients to breathe when they are angry at a bill. When I walked in, the room softened around me, in that artificial way people soften around someone they have already judged. Elaine kissed my cheek and held my shoulders too long. You look lovely, she said, scanning my face for weather. Daniel stood near the dining room, pale and tense. His father gave me a sympathetic nod. His sister avoided my eyes. And there, by the mantel, stood Tessa in a pale pink sweater, holding a glass of white wine like she had been poured into the family. She smiled when she saw me. Not big, not obvious, just enough. Claire, she said, coming forward with open arms. I'm so glad you came. I did not hug her. I let her arms hang there until she lowered them. The room noticed. Good. Let them notice something real, for once. Elaine's mouth tightened. Daniel looked like he wanted to disappear. Tessa recovered quickly, touching her necklace. I was hoping we could have a peaceful night. So was I said. My voice was calm enough that even I trusted it. For 20 minutes, peace pretended to exist. People asked about work, traffic, wedding planning. I answered politely. Tessa stayed near Daniel's mother, speaking softly, occasionally glancing at me as if checking whether the fuse she had lit was still burning. I ate 2 bites of roasted chicken and drank water. I could feel my phone in my pocket, the voice memo ready, but I had not decided to use it. Then Elaine stood near the fireplace and raised her glass. I'm grateful we're all here, she said. Families are not perfect, but love requires forgiveness, humility, and the willingness to move forward. Several people nodded. Tessa lowered her eyes beautifully. Daniel looked at me with panic already forming. Elaine continued. I hope tonight can be a reset. A reminder that no There it was. Misunderstanding. Reshet. Move forward. The room waited for me to accept the language or reject the peace. Tessa looked at me over the rim of her glass, and I saw exactly what she expected. My face flushing, my voice shaking, my pain turning messy enough to discredit itself. Instead, I set my water glass on the side table and asked, Elaine, before we toast to moving forward, could you clarify what misunderstanding you mean? The room went silent with the speed of a door closing. Elaine blinked. Claire, this may not be the time. I nodded. That's what I've been told every time someone had a chance to tell the truth. Daniel whispered my name. I did not look at him. Tessa gave a small laugh. Brittle at the edges. I don't think we need to relive roommate drama at an engagement dinner. I turned to her then. You're right. We don't need drama. We need facts. Tessa's face changed by 1 careful inch. Elaine set her glass down. Claire, she said, her voice low. I invited you here, in good faith. No, I said gently. You invited me here to forgive a story you never verified. That was the first time I saw Elaine lose control of her expression. Not much, just enough to reveal that politeness had always been her armor, not her heart. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. Daniel took 1 step toward me, then stopped when he saw my face. I opened the voice memo, thumb hovering over the screen. Tessa's eyes dropped to the phone, then back to mine. The color left her cheeks slowly, beautifully, like a curtain being drawn. She knew that look, the look of a person who had finally found the light switch in a room someone else kept dark. I saved the part she didn't post. I said. Tessa stared at my phone like it had become a living thing. For once, she did not reach for tears first. She reached for control. Claire, she said carefully. Recording people without permission is actually really invasive. I almost admired the speed of it. She had filmed me in my own hallway. cut the beginning off, posted my pain online, and now the idea of context made her concerned about privacy. Elaine's eyes moved from Tessa to me. Uncertain for the first time that evening, I pressed play. My voice came first, low and strained, asking her to take the shirt off. Then Tessa's laugh came through, soft and almost bored. It was an accident. The recording said, Pause. Daniel's breathing. Then Tessa. Clearer than I remembered. Warmer than any confession should sound. Maybe I wanted you to notice. No one moved. The sentence landed in the room exactly as it had landed in my hallway. Except this time, it had nowhere to hide. I let it keep playing. It's just a shirt. Tessa said from the speaker. I didn't know I wasn't allowed to exist in this apartment. Then my voice. Quiet again. Telling her to keep recording. A chair creaked in Daniel's parents' living room. His sister's face had gone pale. Elaine's hand was still around her wine glass, but her fingers had tightened until her knuckles showed. Tessa whispered, That's out of context. But the problem was that it finally had context. I stopped the recording before it became theater. I was not there to humiliate her for sport. I was there because she had already tried to humiliate me and called it survival. The shirt belonged to my brother. I said, He died 7 years ago. Tessa knew that. It was folded on the top shelf of my closet behind sweaters. She took it, wore it, filmed my reaction, edited the clip, and posted it with a caption that made me look unstable. Elaine's mouth opened, then closed. Tessa shook her head quickly. I didn't know it was that shirt. I looked at her, almost gently. You asked me about it the week you moved in. You called it sacred. Her face changed again. A flicker, so small, maybe only I caught it. But I was not relying on memory anymore. I opened the screenshot folder and turned the phone toward Elaine. There was Tessa's old message that blue shirt is sacred. I'd never touched something like that. Daniel's father made a sound under his breath. Elaine took the phone as if it might burn her. She read the message twice. Tessa moved toward her, reaching. Elaine, you don't understand how intense she was to live with. I almost smiled. That was all she had left. Intense, difficult, too sensitive, too attached. The old words people use when they want a woman's boundaries to sound like symptoms. I opened another screenshot. Here are the unpaid utilities. Here are the texts where she admitted borrowing my clothes. Here is the photo she sent wearing my cardigan. Here is the time-stamped notice after I asked her to move out. Here is the email she copied Daniel on, calling the apartment unsafe because I had records. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. The receipts did what anger could not. They stood upright. Tessa looked at Daniel then, and the look was almost desperate. Not sorry. Desperate. You know how she is. She said, You said she makes everything heavy. The room shifted toward him. Daniel looked at me, and I saw the old hope in him flicker. Not mine this time, but his own hope that he could still stay neutral. Neutrality had been his hiding place, but now the hiding place had glass walls. He swallowed. I said that because I was a coward. He said. Tessa froze. Elaine looked at him sharply. Daniel's voice shook, but he kept going. Claire didn't make it heavy. Tessa did, and I let Claire carry it because I didn't want conflict. I stood very still. The apology was late. Late does not mean meaningless. It just means it does not get to choose the ending anymore. Tessa's face hardened. The softness drained out so completely that several people looked away. "Wow," she said. "So everyone is just going to attack me. Now." Elaine set my phone on the mantel with careful hands. "Tessa," she said. And for the first time, all night, there was no honey in her voice. "You told me that shirt came from the laundry basket." Tessa lifted her chin. "Because that's what happened." Elaine looked at the screenshot again. "Then why did you know exactly which shirt it was?" That question did what my pain had not been allowed to do. It changed the room. Tessa blinked, and there was a long silence where a lie should have arrived. She looked at me with pure hatred for one naked second, before covering it with tears. "I was lonely," she said. "I made a stupid mistake. Claire always had everything. The apartment. Daniel. This perfect, tragic story. Everyone respected. I just wanted someone to see me, too." There it was. Not an apology. An explanation built out of envy and entitlement. She had not wanted my shirt. She had wanted the attention attached to what it represented. She had wanted to prove she could touch the one thing I protected and still make everyone comfort her afterward. I felt sad then, but not in the way she wanted. I felt sad for every person who thinks being unseen gives them the right to invade someone else's life. I picked up my bag from the chair. Daniel stepped toward me. "Claire, please don't leave yet." I looked at him and felt the strange calm of a door closing without being slammed. "I am leaving," I said. "Not because I'm angry, because I finally understand what this family calls peace." Elaine flinched. Daniel's sister covered her mouth. I continued. "Peace here means the hurt person stays elegant, while everyone else avoids the truth. I can't marry into that." Daniel's eyes filled. "Are you ending it?" The room seemed to stop breathing. I thought about our first apartment tour. The ring in its velvet box. The guest list still unfinished on my kitchen table. I thought about how many times love had asked me to wait for him to become brave. Then I said, "Yes." The word hurt. It also fit. I'm ending an engagement that required me to prove I deserved loyalty. He nodded once. Slowly. Like something inside him had been expecting the sentence, even if he had dreaded it. Tessa gave a small sob from across the room. But nobody moved toward her. That was the most honest consequence she received that night. Not punishment. Not yelling. Just the sudden absence of an audience. Elaine sat down, as if her bones had gone tired. "Claire," she said quietly. "I'm sorry." I believed she meant it. I also knew, meaning it did not undo the invitation. I reached into my bag and took out the folded blue shirt. The repaired sleeve showed under my fingers. Dark thread holding damaged cloth together. Beside it, I pulled out Evan's photo. I did not pass either around. They were not evidence anymore. They were mine. This is what she took. I said, "Not fabric, not nostalgia. A private piece of my brother, and all of you asked me to make that easier to dismiss." No one answered. Good. Some silences are not avoidance. Some silences are the sound of a room finally having to sit with itself. I put the shirt and photo back into my bag, took my phone from the mantel, and walked toward the door. Daniel followed me to the porch. Behind us, I heard Elaine asking Tessa to call a ride. The sentence was quiet, but I heard it clearly. Tessa's voice rose in protest, then cracked against a wall that had not been there before. Outside, the air was cold enough to make my eyes water. Daniel stood under the porch light with his hands open at his sides. "I love you," he said. I looked at him, and for the first time, love did not feel like an obligation to stay. "I know," I said, "but you loved comfort more." He closed his eyes. That was the kindest, cruel truth I had left. I did not hug him. I did not give him one last soft place to land. The aftermath was not dramatic in the way people expect. Tessa did not become a villain in a headline. Daniel's family did not collapse. No one got dragged to court. Real consequences are often quieter. Elaine sent a written apology 2 days later. Daniel mailed back the ring in its box because I could not bear to meet him. Tessa blocked me after posting one vague quote about betrayal revealing true friends. This time, almost no one reacted. Marlene helped me draft a short message for the few mutual friends who asked. Not a statement, not a defense, just the truth in 4 calm sentences, with no insults and no begging. A private item belonging to my late brother was taken from my closet without permission. My reaction was recorded and posted without the full context. I have documentation of the pattern. I'm not discussing it further. It felt strange how powerful a period could be. My mother and I framed Evan's photo that weekend. We did not frame the shirt. She asked if I wanted to keep it in a shadow box, but I said no. I wore it instead, repaired sleeve and all, while we made pancakes in her kitchen and played Springsteen too loud. The shirt did not feel untouched anymore. It felt changed. That used to scare me. Then I realized, surviving damage is not the same as being ruined. 3 months later, I moved to a smaller apartment across the river. One with old hardwood floors and windows that caught the morning sun. The first thing I unpacked was not a dish or a lamp. It was Evan's photo. I set it on a bookshelf beside a cedar drawer liner. I bought for no practical reason, except that the smell made me feel steady. My new closet had a lock, but I rarely used it. Safety, I learned, is not only a lock. It is the right to say no before something breaks. Daniel wrote once in the spring. The message was long, careful, and full of accountability he had probably earned too late. He said he was in therapy. He said he had mistaken calm for goodness. He said he hoped I knew none of it was my fault. I read it twice, then put the phone down. I did not answer. Not because I hated him, because not every apology is a doorway. Some are just proof that you were right to leave. For a long time, I thought strength meant staying composed while people mishandled me. I thought maturity meant translating my pain into language gentle enough for everyone else to accept. I thought love meant giving people time to understand what respect should have made obvious. I was wrong. Strength is not silence. Maturity is not self-erasure. Love that requires you to abandon yourself is not love. It is training. People like Tessa do not always arrive with obvious cruelty. Sometimes they arrive needing a room. A favor. Una chance. A little understanding. They borrow small things first. A sweater, a story, a place at the table. Then one day, they reach for the thing you never offered. And if you protest, they call your boundary proof that you are hard to love. That is how theft becomes drama. That is how disrespect learns to wear tears. I still have the blue shirt. The repaired sleeve is visible. The cuff is uneven. The fabric is thinner now. And if you look closely, you can see where the color changed after that night in the washing machine. I used to think the damage would always remind me of Tessa. It does not. It reminds me of my mother's hands, Evan's handwriting, and the night I stopped begging people to understand why something mattered before I protected it. My roommate wore my shirt by accident. Then she said, maybe she wanted me to notice. She was right about one thing. I did notice. I noticed the theft, the performance, the silence around it, and the people who asked me to make betrayal more comfortable for them. Then I noticed myself, and once I did, I never handed myself back.